Hey everyone, you're welcome back. In our last tutorial, what we did was to create this nice cityscape, and it's not really in its best form yet. We're going to add a few things to make this design appear much more nicer, especially some atmospheric perspective effects, and also add a few gradients and adjust some of these. Now, the first thing I want to do is to fix this shape. It just looks so off, and that's because I'm not giving it a little bit of side, so it doesn't really look and fit into this perspective. So let's just quickly fix that. So let's select this group. It's the buildings on the left. We call buildings left. I'll just tear this out, drag this, and just go to the bottom and drag this down, so I can easily expand and quickly find where things are. I believe that should be 5. So we can just turn this off and turn it on, and we can see 5 right there. So what can we do to fix this? I would just want to add a side to this. So what I'll do is to hit Ctrl J. And once I've done that, I'll just slightly deviate from this color to make it appear like it's darker, and I'll first flip this. So I'll go up here where it says flip horizontal and flip this, and just drag this over here. We can see how this looks like. We can just slightly rotate and move it over here like that. Let's just click away and see how it looks like. So already it's looking better. So we'll just go to the duplicate, and since this is backing away from the light, I'm assuming the light is coming from the top right. So here, I'll just make this slightly darker. So I'll go to the swatches, and this value here, we'll just go one value back, and let's just see how that looks like. So this building looks like it has a little form to it. Let's see what's going on here as well. I have a planar face. I think it would be better if I just used this smaller part and just drag it down like that. I believe this will, appear like it has some form here. And if we actually look at these, if I go back to 5 and zoom in, I'll just drag this here and drag this to this point and zoom in again and just move around. So we can just clearly see some issues we have here. So I'll just use the move tool and just drag this, make sure it snaps. Now I might need to use the node tool to just pull out the base. So I'll switch over to the node tool, and let's just move this till I can see the node at the bottom, and I'll just drag that here so we don't see that artifact. So that's just that's that. And what I want to do is to just group these together. So I believe it's for this one. So these two, I'll just group them together and hit Ctrl G, and I'll call that group 5, like that. And let's see what we can do now. So the first thing is to add a slight little gradient from where the light source is coming from. If we look at our design, our light source is coming from, we can use a nice little light source here on this object. So let's just click on that. It's called curve 1, curve 2. I'll just call that M1, and I'll call this M1 actually, and I'll call this M2 because it's the second one. And let's look at the background. So the first thing we'll do is to add a few gradients on everything. So I'll show you how to quickly do that. So I'll just move around here. So the navigator is really a very nice tool. It has some other options. If we tear it out like this and click on the hamburger menu, we can save a view. Let's say, for example, I just zoom here because I want to walk on this point. I'll just right click here and say save current viewpoint. So now we have a viewpoint 1. If I change this, I could just go to viewpoint 1 and say, hey, I have this viewpoint here. I can zoom in and drag, say, to this edge here, the top left, right? So I can just go here and say save current viewpoint. So now I have 2 viewpoints. So I can move from viewpoint 1 and move to viewpoint 2. The top left, if we want one at the center, like that. So we could just save this viewpoint. So we have 3 viewpoints: the top left, center, top left, and then we have the mid. Look at that. So it's nice to really see. It's this is really handy. It's faster than pressing spacebar to use the hand tool like that and holding the spacebar. You could just have your navigator and you can navigate to any section, and you could just dock it anywhere and it will not be obstructive. So let's get back to the tutorial. So I'm on viewpoint 3 like that, and what I want to do is add some gradient to this object. So I'll go to M1, and right here I'll click on the here where it says transparency tool. I'll right click and just hit that. So it's saying a solid gradient. Let's try a radial gradient, and basically what we want to do is to have some light radiating from the center. So I'll just zoom out a bit and then use these gizmo handles. And you can just see that. So we have light emanating from the source. Now that light source is a bit weak in my own, perception. So what I'll do is, you see these 2 edges? This is the lightest color, and it's going to be moving towards this value. So I'll change this one to something quite bright like that. And you can really see the effect when you look at your view at the navigator. You can actually see that source coming from the center, and then it's just radiating out. And we can move it around like that. So I'll just leave it at the center. It might be a bit too bright, right? So we could just dial down the opacity like that. So I think this is a good value to use. And also I want to have a nice little gradient for the background. So I'll hit the background, and while I'm on the gradient tool, and this is actually called the flood fill tool. I'm just calling it gradient tool because I'm used to calling it from other softwares. And I'll just click and, oops, sorry, not the flood fill. What am I doing? So here, yeah, this one, the gradient tool, not flood fill. And we could just drag this. So you can see what's happening here. We have a nice little sky, right? Sky gradient, like that. And we can drag this. And the effect is quite subtle. So I'll just click here and go over here to the top. I'm leaving this at linear. So I'll click here and go to this first color. And let's just, now that's super bright, so I'll just leave it here because eventually I'm going to be adding a levels to a levels node to balance out the color and darken or brighten everything else. So I believe I could just leave it like that so I don't have any issues. So the next thing we'll do is to work on these groups here. So let's go back up here. So for the buildings, we have 2 groups, 2 subgroups in the building. We have the buildings on the left and the buildings on the right. And here, look at our design looks super weird. So let's just bring this back. And also, I live in a rural community here in Nigeria, so there are a lot of chickens around, and it's morning, so the roosters are roosting. Apologies for that. You can just take that as background music, and you'll be good to go. So now that I have the buildings left, what I want to do is apply this same effect to this entire set of buildings to indicate some certain kind of fog. So to do that, let's head over to our gradient tool and I think I clicked on left, not right. And let's just add some of that. So I can see it's really extremely strong and it's fading and killing out everything. Let's undo that. And let's just try to drag this down. So what we can do is to dial down the opacity. That's not really helping. Let's change this value to something, say, dark like that. So it's adding this effect here. So this is what I'm going to do. I'll undo everything. All right, let's just undo that, undo. So there are a lot of tricks we can do. I'm thinking about something here. I want to create a larger shape encompassing everything here. And once I have that shape, I just fill that shape with a specific value. Let me show you what I mean. So say, for example, this one. I have that group. So I'll go to layer. Let's see if we can I'm trying to merge everything in the group. Let's right click and see. I believe I can do it from here. Yeah, I could just say rasterize the mask if that's going to work. And so I'll just turn this off. So the mask is affecting both groups, right? I just have one of this. So that's not an option. So I'll just undo that action. Good. So let's try another option. Let's just try the basic rasterize. So what this means is we don't have group sections in this guy. So if I turn this side off, you can see we just have one single pixel there. And then once we have that, let's try applying, oops. So again, this doesn't work for this group. So I'll just undo that rasterize I did. So let's just undo this. So it's kind of tricky trying to just find a balance and say, this is what we actually want to do. And let's just keep trying. Eventually we're going to get a nice little option. Another option will be to just pick each one and then apply a basic gradient. Right, so, but let's try something else. Let's go over here and let's mask the layer. So now we've masked that layer, let's try applying the gradient to the mask. And you can actually see this actually works. This is better. All right, so this actually works. So that's one way to actually add some of that more form to this object. I'll just turn this off. And what we want to do, we can even rotate this. So let's rotate it and drag it somewhere around here. And let's now try playing around with our mask. You can see we're slowly just giving some of these some lighting and shading. So like that. So I'll leave this here. And because we're using the mask, you can see if we change this value, this is going to be light and this is going to be dark. So we'll just leave it somewhere around here and see some of that. So I really like how it's worked here. So let's try that same thing on this section here. So let's mask the layer, and once we have the layer masked, we can use our gradient tool to add a nice little fall off like that. Alright, so subtle but effective. Great. So what we can do next is add a little bit of atmosphere between these different layers. I believe that will make it additionally pop. So to do that, let's create a shape. So I'll just go over here on the rectangle tool and just create a shape like this. So we have this shape. I want to make this slightly bright, so I'll go to my swatches and select this value. And what I'll do next is to apply an effect. So I'll go to FX, go to Gaussian blur. I don't know why Gaussian blur is at the bottom. It's my best effect. I would want to put it at the top if I could. So, but no problem. In Affinity Designer 1, it's actually at the top. So let's blur everything out. Let's try 200. So you can actually see what's happening right here. We have created a fog. Let's try 300. So good. I really like 300. So what we can do now is to place this. Let's call this atmosphere actually. Yeah. So now let's place it in between our layers. So we have our building AB. We have our wires, clothes, our sketches. We have our background. So placing this between the wires, you can see what's happening now. So let's put this in between the clothes, and let's put this in between the sketch and the buildings. So this is between building A and B, and let's place this here. So let's turn that off. So you can see we're having that before, it's in front of the background and our light source, and it's actually hiding our light source. I think a good place to put it is right here. Yeah, in front of our buildings, maybe in front of the clothes too. And remember, not all our wires are actually, I didn't put all the wires in a layer, so just to put that. So what we can do is just reduce that effect. We could just drag this down here, right? And we can just move it down like this. So you can actually see the full thing here, the full fog here. I'll just dial this down a bit. So we can see it's giving us some of that atmospheric effect. What we can also do is, if we wanted to reduce that, is once we have this, let's use the transparency tool. And we can either drag it from the top like that. So we can have this coming from the top, and we can move this up. Yeah, I believe I like it from the top. And we'll just dial this back up a little bit. So good. I think this percentage is not too disturbing. So what it's doing is actually taking away some of that, light here, and then we can see some of that objects in the distance. Now, what I actually noticed is some of these fabrics, they just look very, very similar. Look at that. There's no distinction, no difference, and we did a really poor job at creating these. So let's see if we can work on the clothes and try to add some variation to them. So here, I'll just open the clothes layer and open the which group do we start with? Let's start with the one that's very close to us. That's 1. Let's start with group 1. So I'll click on group 1, click and expose group 1, and I'll click on this first curve here. And basically what I want to do is to add some slight variation to this object. What we can do is to warp. Let's right click, and I'll just look for it here. Not here. Let's see. I believe it's under layer. Let's do a mesh. There's no mesh. So if I just zoom in and move down here, we have a nice little mesh, and we can just go in here and play around with this. So let's select, say, this one, and let's go to layer, warp group mesh. So we could just play around with this. And that might actually be a bit time consuming, but you get the deal. So we can even go to this one, or select this one, just pull it and push it around to give it some slight little difference. And let's go to this object. Let's drag this one here. And let's see if we could just apply the same effect. So let's use some perspective. So it's always going to just pick one, so we could just use that to move things around. And we can even do things as simple as just flipping them around if we want. So I'll just go here, transform, flip. And I'll go back to the node tool and just adjust this. And this one as well. Let's just move this here, drag this. And this one too. Alright, so you can see they're slightly different, right? And we can change their position. So here, I'll just pick this one and just drag it over here, rotate, and I'll pick this one and just push it over here. I'll swap these two's position. I'll just place you here. Alright, so you can see we have a nice little variation, and I believe that's super nice. So what we can do next is to add a little bit of texture to our design because it looks very clean. So one thing we want to do is to make it look natural, like there's some sort of noise. And let's jump ahead and let's do that. So I'll just close everything. So I'll just go up here, close our first group and close the clothes. And I believe we can group everything together. So let's just hit Ctrl A and let's say Ctrl G, and let's call this vectors. I'm out of ideas, so I don't know what to call. I'll just call this vectors, and it's a good thing to always save your work. I haven't been saving. I believe Affinity Designer gives us an autosave feature that's really helpful, but we need to autosave. Now I'm also seeing that I might need to bump up this effect here that we created. Oh, by the way, if you have an effect and you want to go back to your gradients, just click the layer that has that effect and click the appropriate tool and you'll be back where you are. Alright, so I'll just move over there. So let's add our nice little effect, and to do that I like using the pixel persona for this. So I'll switch over to pixel persona and I'll create a pixel layer. So I'll go over here, hit pixel layer, and I'll just say noise, like adding random noise to this. Let's go to brushes and switch to textures. So each time I try switching to a brush, I noticed the program always has a hard time. I believe it's because there are lots of them. So let's see here. Let's go to the textures category, textures. And honestly, this is just a matter of opinion. So I'll pick this, where are my layers? I'll just drag this out and pick this grunge pattern 2. Let's see if we can and make this big. Okay, I'll just leave that. So I'm on grunge pattern 2, and what color am I using? I want to use a neutral, something like this, and I'll hit the brush tool, so paint brush tool, or hit B, and now I'll just start going super crazy and, you know, painting around here like that. You can use light value, dark value, it doesn't matter. Just add random noise around like that. And this is how you can create nice texture, by the way, in case you want to create things like rocks. So I'll also set the width, the smaller width, because I want to have small particles, large particles, like that. You can see that effect. So I'll go over here, just play around with this. So let's go to the brushes again, and let's pick something. Let's try grunge pattern 5. Grunges are actually the best, in my opinion. So let's just bump this up a bit, and I just smack these around. Yeah, good. So that's my noise. Hey, it looks like it's snowing. Nice. So yeah, we have this. So how do we reduce this? And let's just add one more. Let's use this grunge pattern 4 and make it look really cracky and scaly like that. So first, let's soften the effect of the noise. So to do that, let's add this effect and Gaussian blur, you guessed it. And let's just dial this up a bit. So the noise isn't too sharp, and you know, it's not too disturbing. And all we need to do now is just turn down the opacity of this till it becomes barely visible. So I'll just dial this down a bit, and you can see what it's doing there. Just a little bit of this has made this look quite interesting. So this is without the noise, and this is with the noise. So like that. And yeah, that looks quite interesting. We can do things like add smudges and blurs and even increase the intensity of this. So to do that, I'll group the noise. So I'll hit Ctrl G with the group selected, with the noise selected. I'll just call the group G underscore noise, like that. And with this, let's add some adjustments. So one of the best ones to use is to use the levels node. And with that, we can do things like bring up more of this using white, or get rid of the lightness, make it more dark. So you can see by switching that, we are also affecting how it looks like, more of it or less of it, right? Just by changing that value. Yeah, so it's just something you can be aware of. I'll go over to the group and make sure I dial down the strength of that adjustment. And just pull this down a bit. Yeah, I think this is super nice. So good. So now we have our sketch and our vectors. Let's add some nice little effects on this entire artwork to really make it stand out. One of the things I like to do is add a little bit of contrast. So we can just simply use the contrast to see how that works. So here I'll go to the adjustments and let's look for contrast. We don't even have brightness and contrast here. Oh, it's called something else. Oh, here it is. Good. Yeah. I knew Affinity is not gonna. And you can see what's happening here. We can just darken this, right? Make this super bright. I'll also change my screen opacity. Might actually be very low, so it's going to affect how I'm seeing things. So I'm just using a full brightness on my screen to make sure I have a good contrast. So here we can actually see that. And just by increasing my screen's brightness, I can actually see that that noise is slightly much. So I'll just still dial this down to about 8%. So let's switch back to the designer persona and let's see if we can do something here. I want to actually reduce the effect of this noise. I don't want it everywhere. I could simply use masks over there, but I want to see if we can combine the transparency tool on layers that are not part of it. So you see that doesn't really, sorry, I'll go over here. So it's not actually trying to, it's not working. So let's go back here. And what we can do is to mask this layer. So if I go to, if I hit this is the noise layer. So I believe I can use a paintbrush and then use, I'll press D to switch everything to default. And let's just, let's increase the noise so that we can clearly see everything. And so you see, I'm actually hiding some of that noise using black. So say maybe in this area, I don't want to have much of the noise, but I want the noise to be at the top. So I'm just painting away some of that noise. And see, it's actually getting rid of the noise. I don't want it to be everywhere. And here that's white, it's coming back. So let's move this up and I'll just leave it at this value. And I'll set this back to about, yeah, I think 10% is good. It's not bad. So let's switch back to designer and actually save this. So we've added our brightness and contrast here. Let's also add a levels node. So you can see we can even add more of this, and this is going to really push that idea that this object is like that. So I'll just think like 1% is not bad. So for output white, I'll just raise some of the whites, not too bright, but I'll just raise some of that. And what I noticed is, let's leave this. Some of the effects we have for Atmos have been, you know, pushed down a bit. So we can bring back some of our atmosphere like that. And we can move Atmos down a bit. So we could just see it, you know, passing through there. So yeah, I'll still dial this down. So this is without it and this is with it. makes it super nice and interesting. And one thing we can also do, apart from using this trick to add the noise, is to basically just use a texture layer. So you can have a texture and then overlay the texture on the art and mess around with the transparency. We'll do that most likely in another tutorial. So now that we have this one, so we have all our vectors. We have I'll put this in the group so we can see how that's being affected here. So this is our regular one, this is our brightness and contrast, and we'll just dial this down a bit so you can see how it's affecting the entire work. So if we push this, it's 100% here, it's very low, so we'll just drag this here. And there's another nice little effect I like adding. We can even add a lens filter and add a specific color to that lens filter, and you can use this to start creating some nice tones. For instance, if you want this to be warm or cool, so I think this should be much more cool because we're depicting a cool environment, and I'll just desaturate that. And we don't have to use blue, we can use other colors like that. Nice. And this filter has a lot of effects we can actually use as well. So we can use different blend modes for our filter. We can even use a graph to set those blending options. And let's try using the color mode. Like that. And that's looking super cool because it has a nice little cool bluish tone to it, which makes it nice. And let's not use 100% of it, so we could just drop that there. I think for some reason I like the warm tone. It's a very nice warm tone. So what we can do now is to, and this is outside our group, let's make sure it's within the group, and we can readjust and rearrange which of these effects come first. That's one cool thing. And I'll add the most powerful one to me, especially when you create grayscale art and you want to add color. This is a very good way to actually do that, to use this. So here we can actually reduce that intensity. Let's just drag it to something here. So we're getting rid of that saturation. And you see this actually works similar to the lens filter. So let's just add this. So we have a nice little warm tone here. So let's just close that. Let's add a mask from the recolor. And let's use to switch this to default. And here, so you can see what I'm doing here. I have added a gradient to the recolor. So we're having the color coming from this side like that. So I want to have some of it just come from the left here, and then on this right side, let's go to the lens filter and let's try something here. So I'll just bump this up a bit. And let's play around with the optical density. So I believe we might not see this effect. Let's try rearranging it. Good. So you can see what's happening here. So we have it everywhere. If we want to limit the area of influence of this, we can mask this and then use a gradient on the lens filter as well. So let's try changing this to a dark value. So I'll go over here. Let's try making this black. So if we make this black, and let's try playing around with it now. Okay, cool. So we can drag this up here. So if we drag this up here, we're seeing more of the orange. But if we drag it down here, we're seeing more of the cool color come in. So I'll just drag it right here. So it looks like a very subtle effect, but it's actually there. We can actually see it in action. All right, so you can see we have a nice little warm tone, and then we have some nice little cool tone. So to play around with the orange and the slightly blue, we can add this adjustment here. I believe it's called HSL. So then we could just play around with the saturation, so you can see what we have here. All right. So I'm going to put that at 100%. So I'm just monitoring and seeing what's happening here. All right, cool. So what we can also do, is to just move this around. So what we can do is to basically reduce this intensity, set it down to about, so this is it at 0, this is it at 100%. So let's just drag this down a bit and put it midway. And now we can see we have something quite interesting here and quite nice. Yeah, so I think it's a good point to just stop it here, or else we'll just keep going and going and going and trying to add some things here. And yeah, so you can see we have some nice little buildings. We have a little noise. We can turn off our noise, and you can see how nice it's actually looking without the noise. So that's why we can always have these buttons and sliders to reduce the effect or bump the effect to a very high value. And also for the background, let's see if we can slightly improve this. So let's just drag this up here. Yeah, so I just want the sky to have not too high contrast, and I believe this is extremely bright. That's for M1. So to fix that, let's just pick a nice, let's go here. Yeah, I believe we can still see the effect. I don't think we need that region to be very, very bright like that. And we could just dial down the opacity a bit. Because we can still tell, right? We can still tell, hey, that's a bright spot and the light is actually coming from that section. So yeah, these effects might be too much. If you don't like them, you can always turn them off and say, hey, you know what, I just like it like this. We could turn up a few of the effects only. Say, hey, this is what I want. Like, I kind of like this, but we'll just bring some of this back. So I kind of like the nice little orangey thing, so I'll just dial it down a bit. Like that. So it's all subjective. You can play around with this and see how we can actually have fun. So hopefully you had fun learning how to create this, and hopefully you followed along. It's a very interesting process, quite nice and fun. These are very simple designs. But yeah, see you in the next one, and thank you very much for watching. Hello people, so after I had finished the scene, I was just taking a look at it and I realized we did not blow out some of the foreground elements that are extremely close to us, to the camera. By that, I mean, if we look at the wires right now, I actually have this effect on. If I turn this off, you can see that these cables are extremely sharp, but they're very close to us. So one thing we can do is just blow out things that are in the foreground very close to you. So I'll just click on Gaussian blur, and I just set that to about 2.7. so that's just by the way, and you find this in the final image. Thank you for watching.